Rich young people mocked the driver for being a woman on a bus, but when she took off her scarf. The sun begins to set behind the city's skyscrapers, and Laura Martinez, the bus driver, prepares to start her night shift. His uniform, a little disheveled due to the constant hours of work, reflects his dedication and effort. Laura sits behind the wheel, with a determined but tired look, knowing that tonight will be no different from the others. The bus begins to fill with passengers. Among them, a group of rich young people with a defiant attitude, dressed in designer clothes. Their laughter and comments are loaded with sarcasm. Laura watches them in the rearview mirror, feeling a wave of discomfort and helplessness. "Look at that one!" exclaims one of the young people, laughing. What is a woman like her doing driving a bus? Laura tries to ignore them, but their words echo in her mind, amplifying her anguish. His face tenses, and his hands grip the steering wheel firmly. Every hurtful comment is a stab at your dignity. "Is incredible," continues another young man, with a cruel smile. He probably doesn't even know how to drive a bus properly. Laura takes a deep breath, trying to stay calm. His mind is filled with bitter thoughts about the injustice and disrespect he faces every day. He knows his work is important, but the constant disregard is draining his strength. A passenger approaches the group of young people, trying to mediate, but his efforts are in vain. The young people continue to make fun of Laura, increasingly uninhibited and cruel. Laura feels the heat of shame and anger rise within her. "How ridiculous!" one of them mocks. "What are you going to do? Cry at work?" Laura feels a wave of sadness and anger. He knows he can't let his emotions get the better of him, but the humiliation is almost unbearable. She imagines the faces of her friends and family, their expectations of her. Everything seems to go against its value. Finally, reaching a stop, Laura stops with a sudden movement. He goes to the door and with a trembling but firm voice he says, "I'm sorry, I can't continue with this shift. Leave." Laura gets off the bus, her heart racing. The murmurs and giggles of the young people fade away behind her. Outside the bus, Laura leans against a wall, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. She feels an overwhelming weight on her chest, the sensation of being made invisible and devalued. With her head bowed, Laura looks at the ground, feeling the deep sadness of a life full of unacknowledged sacrifices. He wonders how much more he can take, as the night silently moves on, reflecting his pain and disappointment. Night falls over the city of Los Angeles, and Laura Martinez's bus moves slowly through the illuminated streets. Laura, although exhausted, strives to maintain a professional attitude. The atmosphere on the bus is charged with tension, and Laura knows that tonight won't be easy. Upon boarding the bus, a group of rich young people, as always, board with an air of superiority. Among them, the leader of the group, David, with a particularly provocative attitude, settles into the front seats. Laura tries to keep her focus on the road, but the sound of their laughter and disparaging comments fills the air. "Look at that," David says out loud, pointing a finger at Laura. "The driver is a woman. Is he really so incompetent that we need a woman to drive the bus?" The group bursts into laughter, and Laura feels a rush of heat on her face. She tries to ignore the comments, but his words affect her deeply. Indignation and pain grow inside her like an unstoppable storm. "What's wrong, lady?" David continues. "Don't know how to drive this bus?" He probably can't even read the map. Laura takes a deep breath, trying not to lose her composure. He looks in the rearview mirror and sees the mocking faces of the young people. His own reflection shows a mix of pain and determination. She is tired of being society's punching bag, of carrying the weight of prejudice. A passenger standing near the group tries to intervene. "Please leave her alone," says the passenger with a firm voice. She is doing her job the best she can. But the young people mock even more, ignoring the attempt at mediation. David leans forward and with a contemptuous smile, adds, "What's the point of complaining? What are you going to do? Cry and ask to be treated better? Do not make me laugh." Laura tries hard not to show her distress, but her hands tremble slightly on the steering wheel. Anger and pain build up inside her. He feels that injustice and contempt are about to overflow. When the bus reaches a stop, Laura stops with a sudden movement. The young people continue to laugh and make hurtful comments. Laura, in a moment of desperation, gets up and walks towards them firmly. Enough, says Laura, with a broken voice. I'm not going to continue putting up with this. The young people remain silent, surprised by his reaction. Laura, with her heart beating strongly, bends down and picks up a small object from the floor, the red lenco that she had used on her shift. Laura's gaze is hard and determined, while her voice breaks. This lenco is a gift from my mother. I will not allow anyone to disgrace him. Laura throws the lenco to the ground with an energetic gesture, and then walks away, leaving the bus in the middle of the road. The atmosphere inside the bus becomes heavy, filled with awkward murmurs and curious glances. Laura walks out onto the street, feeling tears burning in her eyes. Standing on the sidewalk, Laura watches the bus drive away, feeling the weight of her decision. Her heart is torn, and the sense of defeat envelopes her. As the night wears on, Laura leans against a wall, head bowed, and lets the tears flow freely. The rich young people, still on the bus, look at each other, feeling a mixture of surprise and remorse. The mockery and amusement have given way to an awkward silence, as the bus drives away down the street, carrying with it the echo of Laura's humiliation and suffering. The next morning, the sun slowly rises over Los Angeles, but Laura Martinez is already on her feet before dawn. His house is modest, a small apartment in the center of the city, where every corner reflects years of struggle and sacrifice. Laura, still with a tired face from the night before, heads to the kitchen with heavy steps. At the kitchen table, her mother, Rosa, sits, looking out the window with a worried expression. Rosa has been a constant source of strength and love for Laura, although her strength is waning due to her chronic illness. "Good morning, Mom," Laura says, trying to put on a smile as she prepares breakfast. Rosa looks at her with eyes full of sadness, noticing the marks of fatigue on her daughter's face. "How was your night?" Rosa asks, her voice soft but full of concern. Laura sighs, trying to hide her anguish. She places 2 cups of coffee on the table and sits across from her mother. "It was difficult, as always," Laura answers. "The passengers are not friendly at all." Rosa takes Laura's hand in hers, with an expression of deep concern. "I'm sorry, daughter. I don't know how you stand it. You are so strong, but I know this is affecting you." Laura closes her eyes for a moment, feeling a wave of sadness. Her life has been a constant struggle since her father passed away when she was young. Since then, Laura has worked tirelessly to care for her sick mother, facing prejudice and challenges at every step of her life. "Do you remember when your father gave me this lenco?" Rosa asks, looking at the old red lenco in a special box on the shelf. The lenco is worn, but still retains a special shine. Laura nods, her eyes full of nostalgia. That lenco has been a symbol of love and sacrifice, a link with his past and the strength of his family. "I remember it well. It was a reminder of his love and what he meant to us as a family." The conversation is interrupted by a slight cough from Rosa, and Laura gets up to look for medicine. As he does so, his mind returns to the night before, the slight he suffered, and the pain he still feels. The reality of her financial difficulties and the weight of her responsibilities overwhelms her. Later, Laura is at the bus station, getting ready to start another shift. Laura's mind is still tormented by the memory of the mockery of the young people and the humiliation she felt. Despite her determination to move forward, the weight of her personal struggles and responsibilities toward her mother overwhelm her. While walking to the bus, Laura passes by a small antique store. A display case displays memories of times gone by, and an old wall clock captures your attention. Laura stops, looking at the clock sadly. It is a reminder of the time that has passed, of broken promises and of dreams that seem far away. Why does it always seem like we're fighting against the current? Laura mutters to herself, feeling deep sadness. At that moment, the sound of the bus starting brings her back to reality. Laura takes a deep breath, trying to gather the strength to face another day. As he boards the bus, his face reflects a mix of resignation and determination. She knows that her struggle is continuous, but her love for her mother and the desire to overcome her adversities keep her going. Laura starts the bus engine and looks in the rearview mirror, seeing the faces of the passengers. She knows that life will continue to challenge her, but her love and strength are the lighthouse that guides her through the darkness. It's another day in Los Angeles, and Laura Martinez prepares for her night shift with a mix of resignation and determination. Although the sun has set, the city is still bustling with life and your bus begins to fill with passengers again. Laura sits behind the wheel, her face tired but firm, as she watches the flow of people entering. Among the passengers, the group of rich young people is back. Laura feels a wave of anxiety as she watches them board, remembering the humiliation she suffered last time. The young people sit in the front seats, chatting animatedly and casting mocking glances at Laura. "Look," says David, the leader of the group, with a contemptuous laugh. "There's the driver again. Let's have some fun?" Laura takes a deep breath, trying to ignore the comments. It focuses on traffic and the bus route. However, the atmosphere on the bus becomes increasingly tense, and Laura feels the pressure oppressing her. His hands shake slightly on the wheel. At one point, Laura stops at a stop, and the young people begin to murmur and laugh. David, with a cruel smile, makes a comment. "Look at that Lenko," he exclaims. "Where did he get that from? Surely you can't afford anything better?" Laura, feeling like her emotions are about to explode, gets up from the driver's seat and heads to her small compartment to pick up an item. He stops in front of the rearview mirror and with a deep sigh, takes out the red Lenko that he had hidden in his bag. It is the same Lenko that his mother gave him, a symbol of love and sacrifice. "This Lenko is special to me," Laura says, her voice trembling but firm. "I don't want anyone to disgrace him." The young people remain silent, surprised by Laura's sudden reaction. David, somewhat bewildered, watches as Laura approaches the group. She holds the Lenko carefully, her face reflecting a mix of sadness and determination. Laura, in an act of frustration and defiance, throws the Lenko to the ground with a sudden movement. The Lenko falls to the floor of the bus, the bright red contrasting with the gray floor. The murmurs among the young people die down, and an awkward silence fills the air. "That's what they think of my work and me," exclaims Laura, with tears in her eyes. "I will not allow myself to be humiliated any further." With her heart pounding, Laura takes a step back, trying to hold back her tears. She feels the weight of humiliation and despair overwhelming her. The young people look at her with a mixture of surprise and embarrassment, and the atmosphere on the bus changes palpably. Arriving at the next stop, Laura heads to the door and opens it, ready to leave the bus. He feels like he's walking out of a battle, his shoulders slumped and his expression defeated. The door closes behind her, and the bus moves forward while Laura stands on the sidewalk, feeling the weight of her decision. With the Lenko still on the ground, Laura watches the bus leave, feeling deep sadness and defeat. Tears begin to roll down her cheeks, and she leans against a nearby wall, her body shaking with emotion. The Lenko, now on the ground, is a symbol of his pain and his struggle. The bus continues its route, carrying with it the murmurs of the young people and the echo of Laura's desperation. The night progresses, and Laura, alone on the sidewalk, tries to catch her breath, feeling the pain and sadness of a battle that is not yet over. Dawn comes with a cool breeze blowing through the streets of Los Angeles. Laura Martinez wakes up in her modest apartment, feeling the heaviness of the previous day still in her body. The lights of the city are already beginning to flicker in the distance, while Laura, exhausted and desolate, prepares to face another day. Laura is in the kitchen, making coffee for herself. The aroma of coffee fills the air, but it can't erase the sadness he feels in his heart. Her mother, Rosa, is lying in bed, resting after a night of discomfort. "Good morning, Mom," Laura says, forcing a smile as she places the cup of coffee next to Rosa's bed. Rosa looks at her with tired eyes, noticing the pain on her daughter's face. "How are you, Laura? You seem to be exhausted." Laura sighs and sits in the chair next to her mother's bed. "It was a difficult night," Laura admits. "The young people on the bus made me feel very bad." Rosa takes Laura's hand and squeezes it gently. "Don't let them hurt you. You are an incredibly strong and brave person." Laura nods, but sadness lingers in her eyes. He knows his mother is trying to cheer him up, but the pain of humiliation is still fresh. The conversation is interrupted by the sound of a doorbell. Laura gets up to open the door, finding Marta, a family friend and work colleague, standing in the doorway.
Laura.
Marta exclaims with a worried expression. I saw what happened on the bus last night on the news. I was so worried about you. Laura invites her in, and Marta sits in the room, her gaze full of empathy. It was horrible, Laura says, her voice breaking. I felt completely devastated. Marta nods, understanding the depth of Laura's anguish. People don't understand what happens behind those uniforms. What you did was brave, but I understand that you feel hurt. While they are talking, a group of neighbors begins to arrive, attracted by the news that has spread through the community. Laura feels overwhelmed by the attention, but also by the unexpected support. Each person who arrives brings words of encouragement, and Laura begins to feel a mix of gratitude and vulnerability. An older neighbor, Don Javier, approaches Laura with a fatherly look. Laura, I saw you last night on the bus. What those young people did was unacceptable, says Don Javier, with a firm voice. You are not alone in this. We are with you. Laura feels tears of relief and gratitude filling her eyes. She realizes that despite the cruelty she faced, her community is willing to support her and sympathize with her suffering. The warmth of her friends and neighbors surrounds her, giving her a comfort she didn't expect. Marta looks at Laura and tells her firmly, You're going to get over this, Laura. You have all of us by your side. Laura nods, her heart relieved but still full of pain. He knows recovery will be a process, but the support of his community gives him a spark of hope. The afternoon progresses and Laura decides to return to the bus, determined to face the challenge again. As she enters the station, the murmurs of the community have changed in Laura's favor, and she feels a surge of renewed strength. When Laura boards the bus to start her shift, she notices that the atmosphere has changed. Passengers look at her with respect and support, and the atmosphere inside the bus is different. She sits behind the wheel, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of community and hope on her shoulders. The bus pulls away, and Laura drives with a mix of determination and gratitude. Although the battle is not over yet, Laura feels that the support of her community is the beacon that will guide her through her challenges. The night wears on, and Laura presses on, hoping that each day will be an opportunity to heal and find her strength. The days go by, and Laura Martinez continues to face the reality of her daily life. Although the community's support has given him a spark of hope, memories of humiliation and pain are still present. Night has fallen again, and Laura is behind the wheel of her bus, trying to maintain her composure as she drives through the streets of Los Angeles. Tonight, the bus is especially full. Among the passengers, Laura notices the presence of a group of men in elegant suits. They are company executives, who seem relaxed and talk animatedly. Laura tries to focus on her work, but something about the attitude of these men worries her. As the bus pulls into a stop, one of the executives, a man named Samuel, approaches the driver. His face is arrogant, but his gaze shows curiosity. Laura, aware of his presence, greets him with a professional attitude. Good evening, sir, Laura says, trying to keep her voice calm. Samuel looks at her with a mixture of interest and disdain. Are you the famous driver who appeared on the news? Samuel asks, with a slightly mocking tone. Laura feels a wave of tension. He tries hard not to let his emotions overflow. Yes, it's me, Laura answers, her voice firm but controlled. What I can help? Samuel smiles superiorly and begins to speak with an air of condescension. I've been hearing a lot about your story. I find it interesting how you've handled this whole situation. But tell me, how do you really feel about all this? Laura looks at him, her stomach churning at the challenge implicit in the question. She feels like she is being evaluated, and the weight of past humiliation is present again. I feel like any person in my position, Laura answers. I have faced many difficulties, but I am here to do my job to the best of my ability. Samuel nods slowly, but his look is contemptuous. Well, there's something about your attitude that intrigues me. Although, to be honest, I wonder if you really understand what it means to face life this way. Laura breathes deeply, feeling the anger and sadness build up inside her. Samuel's tone reminds her of the cruelty of the night when the rich young men made her feel inferior. His voice breaks as he answers. I don't need someone like you to tell me how to face my life. Every day is a struggle, and I try to do the best I can. Samuel seems surprised by Laura's response. He realizes that his provocative attitude has struck a chord. The atmosphere on the bus becomes tense as the other passengers watch the interaction with interest. Suddenly, one of Samuel's colleagues, a younger man with a more humble attitude, approaches Laura. His face shows empathy and concern. "I'm sorry if this has caused you any inconvenience," the man says. "Sometimes people don't realize the impact of their words. I'm sure you're doing a great job and your bravery is admirable." Laura looks at him gratefully, feeling that there is at least a small comfort in the midst of adversity. His voice softens as he responds. "Thank you. I appreciate your words." Samuel, somewhat uncomfortable by his colleague's intervention, walks away and returns to his seat. Laura is relieved, but the conversation has left her emotionally drained. The reality of her struggle and the challenge of maintaining her dignity in the face of cruelty hits her hard. When the bus reaches the next stop, Laura stops and looks in the rearview mirror, seeing the faces of the passengers around her. She realizes that, despite the difficulties, her courage and determination have left an impression. Laura takes a deep breath, trying to compose herself as she continues her route. The night progresses, and the bus continues on its way, carrying with it Laura's emotional burden and the reactions of the passengers. Laura knows her battle is not over yet, but she feels that by facing each challenge, she is one step closer to finding her peace. The sun slowly sets over the Los Angeles skyline, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Laura Martinez is in the hallway of her apartment, after a long shift at work. Last night, despite the tensions and confrontations, Laura has managed to maintain her dignity and strength, but the emotional burden continues to weigh on her shoulders. Laura enters her small apartment and finds her mother, Rosa, sitting in the living room. Rosa is looking at an old photo, one of the few relics they have from better times. Laura approaches and sits next to her, noticing the sadness on her mother's face. "Mom, what's wrong?" Laura asks, with a mix of worry and exhaustion in her voice. Rosa sighs, without looking away from the photo. With a trembling voice, he begins to speak. "Laura, there is something I need to tell you. I've been keeping this secret for a long time, and I think it's time you knew it." Laura looks at her with curiosity and concern. She takes her mother's hand and squeezes it gently. "What's wrong, Mom? You can tell me." Rosa looks at Laura with tears in her eyes and begins to tell a painful story. "Your father and we had to face many difficulties before he died. But there's something else I've never told you. Before you were born, I had a relationship with a man who was very different from your father." Laura is surprised and feels a knot in her stomach. The tension in the air is palpable as Rosa continues. "That man was an important executive, and our relationship was not easy. When I got pregnant, he disappeared. I never knew what happened to him, but I was always afraid to tell you the truth because I didn't want you to feel slighted." Laura listens, her mind in a whirlwind of emotions. His mother's revelation causes him a mixture of confusion, sadness, and betrayal. "Mom, are you saying that my father was not my biological father?" Laura asks, her voice breaking. Rosa nods slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, daughter. I kept it because I didn't want you to suffer. But now, with everything we've been through, I think it's time for you to know the truth." Laura remains silent, her mind clouded by the revelation. The connection he always felt with his father and the love he has received from his mother seems to be falling apart. He feels the ground crumbling beneath his feet. "Why didn't you ever tell me this before?" Laura asks, her voice heavy with pain. "Why did you hide the truth from me?" Rosa, with tears in her eyes, tries to explain. "I wanted to protect you. I wanted you to grow up without knowing the suffering we went through. But now, with everything that's happened, I feel like you deserve to know the truth." Laura stands up, walking across the room with heavy steps. The revelation has shaken her world, and the pain of betrayal and confusion overwhelms her. "I need time to process this," Laura says, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I can face all this now." Rosa approaches Laura and hugs her, feeling her daughter's desperation. "I'm so sorry, Laura. I will do everything I can to help you through this. You know I love you more than anything in the world." Laura stays in her mother's arms, feeling the warmth of her love, but also the weight of the truth she has just discovered. He sits on the couch, head in his hands, trying to process the emotional impact of the revelation. The night progresses, and Laura is still on the couch, her mind full of confusing thoughts and emotions. The truth about his paternity has added another layer of pain to his life, and now he faces a new challenge in his journey. The clock ticks slowly, and Laura looks at the old photo Rosa was looking at, an image from times past. She knows that the road to acceptance and understanding will be long and complicated, but for now, she allows herself to feel the weight of her pain and the uncertainty that the future holds.